All right, it's time for our live. So, for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, the topic is right here: emotional burden of obesity. And I put as a subtitle "Candid Conversation" because that's what I want to have today. We want to have a real conversation. Carmi, this topic obviously can get pretty emotional, I think, for people. So, as people are watching, I hope they can feel comfortable enough to share their experiences with being overweight. It's interesting because we say obesity, but we're really talking about anyone who just has a perception of feeling that they're overweight, that they're big, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because right now we're not going to define BMIs or what the scientific definition of overweight is. When it comes down to it, there's an emotional burden from when you think that you are heavy, fat, whatever you want to label it as, right? There's an emotional burden to that affects our health, whether or not, and we're not talking about what we're not putting labels on it, anorexic or not, whatever, or bulimic, but just people who have a sensation of perceiving themselves as overweight. You think that's pretty accurate as far as what we're assessing today?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you have your own journey with health and weight loss. I had mine. Ours is quite different. Why
Yes,
shake? You shake your head.
you shouldn't even talk.
I mean, that's not fair. See, now you're being judgmental. See,
I'm
that's
being judgmental because all you got to do is think about losing weight and you lose 30 pounds in no time. So
so
you
there's
don't.
that too, right? The fact that men can lose weight so much faster, right? Than
Mm-hmm.
women can. That adds to this burden. Um, but it still affects men psychologically too. I could imagine. I mean, even still now, every time I look, I'm looking. I'm trying to. What am I constantly doing?
Looking for abs.
Right? Is it there yet? Absolutely. you know, Past 25, man, that's a wrap. Any hope was
Push
gone.
your screen up a bit because your forehead cutting
All
off.
hope is gone after anyone. I don't know if anyone feels it, knows the pain. Once you hit a certain age, man, forget it. Um, that pads are just a permanent thing. But yeah, even me, being all my life thin and able to lose weight quick, it still has a burden, a psychological effect for everyone, I think. So I hope everybody who's watching can feel comfortable about sharing their experiences with being overweight. There's no judgment zone here. And again, we're not putting labels. We're not. Another thing important to note is in this live, in our session for the next 20, 25 minutes or so, we're not talking about solutions either.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, that might seem like discouraging for some, but like, I want solutions. You're supposed to help me lift this burden. Don't talk about it. But I want us to talk about it because next week, our next live, we're going to talk about the solutions. We're going to talk about what we can do as a people, as individuals, to help those who struggle with the emotional burden of being overweight, including, of course, if it's yourself. We're going to give practical and evidence-based solutions. So it's definitely want to mark your calendar for next week on Monday, this time when we talk about the solutions. All right. So I want to start with a question for our audience. We all hear reasons for being overweight, right? A lot of times when you're overweight, you're blamed, right? You're not a victim; it's your fault. So I'm curious if we can maybe just list some of the reasons you've heard that people in our society become overweight, right? What causes obesity? Why are we in a pandemic of obesity where 60% or greater of our population is overweight? Why is that? So let's hear from you guys. What are some reasons people have told you people become overweight? All right, so let's go ahead and were you able to put the question in the title, Carmen?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's changed. So I want people to be able to see the
It
question.
changed on my end. Yeah, it's changed. I can see it on the phone. Yeah.
Okay, on my end, it's not changed. It changed. Let me see. Make sure I'm looking at the right screen too. Yeah, there it is. Okay, yep. So that now I can see it. So I hope you guys can see that, and I should open up the chat so we can see people coming in. Another thing too is you guys are watching. We also I forgot this part. Let us know where you're watching from, if you don't mind. Your name, because we can't see everybody who's on the chat, and I know everyone can't see everyone else on the chat. So I mean, one of the biggest three reasons people are blamed for being overweight is laziness, right? Um, People say that you're lazy, you don't want to exercise. People overweight are they don't want to walk, they just want to sit down and eat chips on the couch, right? Laziness is probably one of the biggest things we tend to hear. Um, of course, the first one before that obviously is overeating.
Mm-hmm.
People just eat too much, and I'm trying to think of others. Help me, Carmen. Like, what are the reasons people say that? Yeah, people become overweight.
Mm. They don't want to eat healthy foods.
Food choices, right?
Yeah.
So they're making bad food choices. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I guess some might say that the lack of prioritization, right? You're just not prioritizing your time. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
some might say it's lack of knowledge. People just don't know what to do, or are ignorant of what eating healthy looks like, right? Which does make sense when you tell people, when people have so many questions on what does it mean to eat healthy. That can be a reason. But then with all these reasons, you're thinking of people being overweight. It does point the finger at the person,
Mm-hmm.
right? It points a finger at the person as the cause of their own weight problem. And there's a problem with that. So I want to share something really quick. Um, so this is a study that highlights a very important fact, that the prevalence of obesity in a weight gain had a trajectory, a steep rise in all places of America at the same time. So
Mm-hmm.
around the 1970s, obesity rates shot up all across our country. Think about that, right? So around the same time period, you see a quick rise in obesity rates. So if it's because people are lazy, but people don't know how to eat healthy, because people don't exercise, people don't prioritize their time, people are overworked, people over stressed, whatever reasons you want to list, that doesn't equate with the math here, right? That at the
Mm-hmm.
same time everyone became collectively lazy, the same time everyone became collectively ignorant. Like at the same exact time, people don't have time to exercise all across America, and this is true across all socioeconomic sectors of our country. And what this another article highlights, this is another article that highlights and points the finger to what I believe is the true cause: an increase in food calorie supply. Because in around the same time, around the 1970s, right, when we see the steep rise in obesity, you see also, and this is something that we're not going to go in details with, but there have been, because there was a lot of changes when it comes to marketing and
Mm-hmm.
profiting off of food.
Mm-hmm.
And corporate shareholders, and basically and making mass amounts of money from selling the pub. There was actually incentive for selling people more calories.
Mm-hmm.
So around the same time, you have this burst explosion of calories from highly processed foods filling the shelves of America, and all of a sudden, like um, overnight, you see obesity rates go up. And this happened across all socioeconomic groups, whether it be Black, white, Hispanic, poor, rich, middle class. All of them, all of us are struggling with this pandemic at the same time. So when you think about that, Kami, can we really blame can we really blame the person, right? And I'm not taking away the accountability that we have in ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's something to be said about um, what it is that causes obesity. So um, with that being said, I don't know if anyone has ever felt guilty and felt like, well, if I'm overweight, it's my fault. I did it to myself, right? I did this. but I want us to stop blaming ourselves. This is a system issue. Some call it, I like this term, of the result of a toxic food environment that we live in.
Hmm.
That we're in this that we're in this mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Carmen?
Mm, yeah, when I think about myself, when I was overweight, you always like clueless.
Hmm.
Uh, how you say? Yeah, clueless because you're trying everything that you heard about that works or whatever, and then you're still not losing weight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all the doctors could tell you, oh, you're overweight. You just have to eat less or move more or something.
Yeah.
But you don't have the science behind why you're overweight.
Yeah. Yeah. Because most of the doctors don't know. They should,
Mhm.
so for you, I'm sure a lot of times you've gone to because most of your life you've been overweight, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And every time you go, you're pretty consistent with going to the doctor. The doctors, did they always tell you that you should lose weight?
Um, I think maybe one doctor told me
Okay.
that I needed to lose weight, but I think doctors, because they think you want to be overweight because you're eating too much, that it's your choice and you don't want to hear about losing weight. So they just say, oh, yeah, you overweight because you want to be like that. So they just leave it that way.
Yeah, we
So,
didn't. Yeah, I wasn't planning on going there, but yeah, that's actually something that I've read in a lot of studies that doctors list as reasons why they don't talk about weight.
mhm.
They just feel uncomfortable with it. It's something that you just don't discuss. We don't talk about Bruno, right? We don't talk about that elephant in that room, like the fact you're obese. And honestly, as a provider, I have been guilty of that. I have felt like this person is going to feel offended if I talk about their weight, right?
Mm,
And I hold myself back from offending them, right?
mm,
But on the same other side of the token, though, you do have people that maybe who like to discriminate against those
mm,
who are overweight. Have you ever felt discriminated against? And I should probably post that as a question for everybody. Um, if you feel comfortable with sharing your experiences on that, instances of feeling discriminated against for being overweight. Has anyone felt that way? Um, Obviously, for myself, I haven't had that problem, but I know a lot of people have. So maybe you could start off, Carmi, maybe talking about your journey if you ever felt discriminated against because you're overweight.
um, Let me see. No, I don't know. I have a bad thing, a character flaw that I don't care. you know.
There you go. Say that.
So you think I have that?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So I think I have that. So I mean, people would call me fat or whatever, and I was just like, okay, good, whatever. I'll eat it anyhow or whatever. I
Mhm.
remember one time when I was young, I was in McDonald's and some guys were laughing or whatever, but I felt bad, but I just didn't care, whatever.
Mhm.
It didn't stop me from eating the fries.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I missed a comment here.
Mhm.
Virginia writes, my 5'2" mom gave birth to me weighing in about 10.5 pounds. That's pretty heavy, pretty big. My baby formula was whole milk and Carol syrup. Carol, I don't know if I've heard of
Oh,
Carol syrup.
yeah, it's a syrup you can put on your pancakes. We used to
Okay.
use that growing up. Hmm.
Yep. So of course, she continues to write, I've been addicted to sugar all my life. I couldn't ever break my addiction until I sought help. Yeah. And that obesity starting from young,
Yeah.
and yeah, there's also studies when your parents are obese, you can actually inherit that obesity just from what they're eating in the womb. Never let alone what you're eating as an infant. And yeah, you can't blame yourself. You can't blame yourself. We live in a toxic food environment where obesity is just a side effect of what's around and what's available to us. And unfortunately, we discriminate. We discriminate against those who are overweight, unfairly. Karma, you do have a layer of protection that most people don't have. That now, not everyone has that plate of armor that they're not affected by ridicule. But you wouldn't be surprised to know, I'm sure, that people who are overweight are commonly ridiculed and discriminated against. Some people say as almost approaching to levels of racial discrimination. Right. You ask most black folk, if they've ever been discriminated against, I mean, your hands are going up, man. Both hands are going up because we've all experienced levels of discrimination. And I don't think we realize that people who are overweight almost experience the same amount, right? So like, and it's almost like, oh, if they complain about it, it's like, well, yeah, you didn't, I didn't choose to be black. So I can complain. But anyway, I want to share some experiences. And guys, I know we have people watching, maybe you're a little hesitant to talk about your experience with discrimination, but don't feel judged if you want to share your experiences here. I want to show some studies that highlight how bad this problem really is when it comes to perceptions of being discriminated against and actual instances of discrimination. If this thing will share, yeah. So this was a study that they did, asked 50 overweight women to write in a diary every day how often or frequently they felt stigmatized. Now, of course, stigmatization is a little different than discrimination. Have you ever heard the term stigmatized, Carmen? Yeah, so stigmatized is basically when someone feels like someone's looking at them a certain way or treating them unfairly, maybe avoiding them because of whatever reason. So 50 overweight women recorded instances where they walk around and they perceived that because they were overweight, people were treating them differently. Okay? And after a week, they had a collective recording of over 1,000 instances where they felt that people are discriminated against. So you just think about that, right? When you're overweight, you're blessed, Carmen, with this armor that a lot of people probably don't have. But I think a lot of people who are watching, a lot of people who are out there do have like a perception that people are looking at them differently, right? And imagine the psychological burden and stress you have when around that, the fact that you're always feeling watched or hated on, essentially. Now, this is another study where people who are asked to basically record instances of discrimination. So discrimination is a little higher than just someone who's being stigmatized. So you could describe discrimination in 3 categories: name calling, so being insulted or called a name, physical barriers, so meaning they're in a position like maybe where their weight isn't accommodated for, right? That makes sense. And poor service, whether it be at restaurants or even in a healthcare setting, because they are overweight. And from the results of this study, I can't remember how many people were in this study, but I think it was a larger group. They found that 3 times a day, women reported instances of discrimination, with 1 time a day for men. It's interesting that men are less discriminated against, but 3 times a day, women feel like they're being discriminated against because of their weight. It's probably even more than that. This is the average. Just think about that. I mean, I feel like I get discriminated against through my life, for my race, but not 3 times a day. It's, yeah. That think about the psychological burden that it has on a person, right? Again, this live, we're talking about the problem. We're not talking about solutions right now, for people who are overweight.
And that's true because I remember, I used to look at 600-pound life and the looks and the stares that these people get when they go grocery shopping.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Everywhere they
crazy.
go, it's almost like your of course 600-pound life is extreme, but still, I'm sure the people in this study were all different weight classes. And they felt discriminated against. Whether or not they really were, there's that perception in your mind too, right? I'm sure a lot of times it's what they're feeling is real. really happening. This is interesting though. So you would ask, the next question is like, when does it start? When do people start discriminating against those who are overweight? Is it something that we just inherit, we just learned as adults to do it? So they did a study, a pretty shocking study, I think in 2000, no, 1970s and also 2006 or so. They repeated it, same results, where they asked children across different cultural backgrounds. So, all across America, poor, rich, wealthy, well, middle class, different races, ethnicities, to fill out a survey. And these are young children, I think as young as even 3, and up, right? So very young children, to ask, according to pictures, what they like best. So the number 1 would be best, and the fifth, the last, would be the least that liked, right? Ugliest or whatever, right? So according to the pictures, they would rank what they like best to worst. And the options were 5 options. 1, a child in crutches with one leg in a brace. 2, a child in a wheelchair. 3, a child with one hand missing. 4, a facially disfigured child. And 5, one of the pictures was an obese child. And guess what? Unanimously, all across America, came last, as in least liked.
Of course, the obese child, I
As we're
guess.
talking about obesity, right? But that's surprising. Obviously, you wouldn't think that. You would think maybe the disfigured child or something. No,
Yeah.
no. Even children, for whatever reason, I still don't understand. If anyone has ideas why they have an idea why that is, why children are even from as young as toddlers see people who are overweight as undesirable.
Yeah.
Talk about burden, right?
Yeah.
That's a heavy burden. That's a heavy burden. So this is the other part of that, right? So those who go through this psychological stress of knowing they're overweight, of being discriminated against from childhood. I should also say, the studies show that people who are called fat, or even if they're not fat, are much more likely not to be overweight when they get older, right?
They are?
They are, right? So if you take two people, one
Mhm.
person is called fat when he's not, and another person is basically same weight but never called fat. They did studies, and the groups of people who are called fat are more likely to become fat, right? The discrimination against them almost triggers them to be overeaters,
Mm.
so I just say that to highlight how damaging it could be to discriminate against those who are overweight and blame. Uh,
Mhm.
but there's also physical side effects as a consequence. So this study is on perceived weight discrimination and C-reactive protein levels, so levels of inflammation. Just walking around perceiving that you're overweight, you're walking around with higher levels of inflammation in your body, whether or
Mm.
not you're overweight. Um,
Wow.
Perceiving that you're overweight, you're walking around with higher levels of oxidative stress in your body, right? Perceiving that you're overweight, studies show that you have a shorter lifespan than the general public. This is a real side effect. This emotional burden. This is why I talk. That's why I decided to talk about it today, because we talk a lot about nutrition and diet and exercise, right? And the components of food and that are good for different diseases, but the most powerful effect on your health you can have is right here, for good and for evil, right? And unfortunately, a lot of us, especially those who perceive they are overweight, whether or not they are, of course, for those who are morbidly obese on the scale or morbidly obese, it could be detrimental to your physical health, right? To have this emotional burden,
Mhm.
right? I wanted to mention one last study that was really interesting as our time is winding up. And again, guys who are watching, is I know we didn't talk. Well, what's give me hope, brother? Like what this is so depressing. I don't know. Is this depressing, Gabrielle? Is this sad? Like to talk about?
Yeah.
It kind of is, right? It's kind of emotional, it's real, it's raw, I think. But we're next week, guys, promise you, we're gonna give glimpses of hope for those who are struggling with this burden. Um, but I want to share one last study that is quite shocking. I think it's important to hear this study, not only for those who are struggling with emotional burden of obesity and overweight, but for those who aren't, especially because we need to understand what um, people are going through who are feeling trapped in a fat body, right? So there was a study. I don't have the highlights of that study. I'll just mention it because it's pretty simple. Where they took I think it was about 47 people who had lost a mass amount of weight. We're talking about on average 126 pounds. Okay, so they were pretty big. They were morbidly obese, not just obese. And this 47 individuals who had lost 126 pounds on average were asked a question, all 47 of them, right, to get their insight on how emotionally burdening obesity can be.
Mm-hmm.
I want everyone to think about this question for themselves. Okay, um, if you were given the option of receiving $2 million today, right, but you had to stay obese, would you do it? $2 million is yours, right? But if you could reject the $2 million and keep your normal weight. So go back to being obese the way you were before and get $2 million, or keep your normal weight and forget bye 2 million. What do you think? What do you think? I
So,
want
so you stay obese and keep 2 million, or don't take the money and come to a healthy weight.
well, they were all these people, all 47 people
Oh,
went
they already lost the weight.
they
Yeah, yeah,
already
yeah.
lost the weight. So they
Ah,
asked
okay.
them,
So
would you
keep
go
their
back to
new weight.
would you
Okay.
keep your new weight, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
tell you that you'd lose out on $2 million, or go back to your old weight and forfeit the 2 million. Let's see. I think we had a comment here. I don't want to miss here. We have a comment here. I don't think I felt discriminated against because I was a child, but I felt the pressure about being chunky. Yep. Yep, that's definitely accurate. For I think it's so sad that it usually happens in children, and it's almost a cycle, right? Because if it starts off, the discrimination starts off in childhood, like that study we just saw with children discriminated against those who
Mm-hmm.
are overweight. It perpetuates into adulthood because now you have this psychological burden, that pushes you to overeat, right?
Yeah.
The stress.
So back to the 2 million.
Yeah.
It's a tricky question because if you have 2 million, then you have a lot of money to go look for resources to lose
Lost
weight.
the weight, right?
Yeah.
But
So,
anyway, yeah. I think most of us, especially who have not been morbidly obese, can answer really quick, right? But I think morbidly
yeah.
obese, that says a lot about a person's
Yeah.
struggle. And all 47 of them said flat out. I'm sorry, take that back. One out of 47 actually stated that they had to think about it, but they would reject the money. The 46 of the 47, they didn't have to think about it. The money was not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Someone said I'll stay obese and keep the 2 million and then work out my weight loss. Yeah, that's true. So, but how about this? Okay, and how they asked the same 47 if they would trade their obesity for another disability. Now, think about this, because if you have a disability, a lot of people are comfortable with their own disability. They're not going to switch to another unknown disability.
Mm-hmm.
This is so true that they've done surveys with people who are blind, asking them if they'd rather be deaf. And a vast majority of people who are blind would not trade their blindness for losing
Definitely. Yeah.
losing the ability to hear, because they're comfortable with that disability. Same vice versa. People don't tend to trade disabilities because they're comfortable with this disability. Do you know that all 47 of these morbidly obese people would rather any other disability than being obese.
Wow.
90% of them, I think it was about 90% of them said they'd rather be blind.
Wow.
And one person even commented, and I'll even end with this here, that when you're blind, people want to help you, but when you're fat, nobody wants to help you.
That's sad.
You know. So think about that. Hey, Jetting Julia. So yeah, I know this is a heavy topic. We didn't get as much very much comments on it, but I hope that people are thinking and really observing so that they know they're not alone. Think
Mm-hmm.
about this too. You know, the powers. Sorry, I'm about to go on a rant before we close, but the powers that created this obesity pandemic are the same powers that are profiting on the cure.
Mm-hmm.
Ozempic,
Mm-hmm.
and all these, billions. They're expecting to make billions of dollars, right? And they know that the true cure is found in lifestyle change, right? And controlling. And it's crazy, like medications like Ozempic. Sorry, I'm not going to go very long with this rant, Carmi. Medications like Ozempic is a cost like of about $1,600 a month that they're pushing for Medicaid and Medicare to supply and pay for people. Imagine what you could do with $1,600 a month. How many gym memberships you can get? How many meal plans you can order? You could probably have 2 health coaches.
Yeah.
You're talking about changing your life or making money. People are gonna, unfortunately, the powers that be just want to make money,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they create this pandemic of obesity, and then they come up with the magic pill to cure it, right? To make billions of more dollars instead of controlling the true problem. But anyway, that's all I'll say about that. Next week we're going to talk about the importance of lifting this burden. And honestly, you have more power than you think. You have more power than you think.
Yeah.
All right. So as always, we always end with a freebie. Our freebie is diabetes reversal consultation for anybody who doesn't have diabetes and just wants to lose weight. We could talk about how we can help you get to your weight goals, right? In a 12-week program. So the consultation is free. Just scan the QR code. If you know anybody who is also needing support, or scan the code and send that link to them. We'll be happy to see if our services are a good fit for you. All right. So everyone definitely tune in next week. All right. I expect everyone watching today to be watching on next week on Monday at 7 p.m. because we're going to talk about really good evidence-based solutions to lift the burden of emotional obesity. All right, beloved, I pray above all things that you may prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers.